5-year-old girl asked a Hell's Angel. Can you pretend to be my dad today? His response shocked everyone. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. The late afternoon sun hung low over the quiet town of Redfield, Missouri, casting long golden shadows across the small parking lot of Miller Family Grocery. The air smelled faintly of gasoline-warm asphalt and freshly cut grass. Somewhere in the distance, a pickup truck rumbled down the county road, while cicadas buzzed in the fading heat of early summer. Marcus Steele Donovan leaned against his black Harley-Davidson motorcycle, his broad shoulders wrapped in worn leather that carried the unmistakable patch of the Hell Angels Motorcycle Club. To most people who passed through this town, Marcus looked like trouble. 6 feet 4 inches tall, 240 pounds of muscle, gray threaded through his dark beard, arms covered in faded military tattoos, and eyes that had seen far more darkness than this peaceful little town could imagine. But right now, he was not looking for trouble. He was simply enjoying the quiet moment after a long ride, letting the soft breeze cool the sweat on the back of his neck when a small voice suddenly broke through the calm. Mr. The voice was tiny, uncertain. Marcus turned slowly, expecting to see a curious shopper or perhaps someone asking him to move his motorcycle. Instead, he found himself looking down at a little girl standing only a few feet away. She could not have been older than 5 years old. Her brown hair was tied into 2 uneven pigtails, and she wore a small blue dress with white flowers that fluttered gently in the wind. In her hands, she held a piece of folded construction paper decorated with bright crayons. Marcus noticed the way her small sneakers were dusty, like she had been standing outside for a long time. Her eyes, wide and nervous, slowly lifted to meet his. For a moment, the little girl simply stared at the towering biker in front of her, the leather vest, the thick beard, the heavy boots. Most children would have run the other direction, but this little girl did not move. She took a deep breath, the kind of breath people take when they are gathering courage for something important. Then she asked the question that would stop Marcus Donovan heart cold. Can you pretend to be my dad today? The words hung in the warm air between them for several long seconds. Marcus did not respond. The noise of the world seemed to fade away. The distant truck, the buzzing insects, the soft creak of the gas pump beside them, all of it disappeared as Marcus looked down at the little girl. Something about her voice carried a quiet desperation that did not belong in a child so young. Marcus had faced armed men in desert war zones. He had stood toe-to-toe with dangerous bikers in dark roadside bars, but nothing had ever caught him as off guard as this small trembling request. Finally, Marcus lowered himself onto one knee so that his eyes were level with hers. Up close, he could see the faint shine of tears forming at the corners of her eyes. What is your name, kid? He asked softly. The girl hesitated, then answered, Emily. Emily Carter, she said, clutching the paper in her hands a little tighter. Marcus noticed the colorful words written across the front of the paper in large, uneven letters. Father Day celebration today. Bring your dad. The realization struck him like a sudden punch to the chest. Marcus opened his mouth to respond, but before he could speak, he heard the sharp echo of an angry male voice somewhere across the parking lot. Emily, where are you? A shadow of fear rushed across the little girl's face. She stepped closer to Marcus, almost hiding behind his leather vest, and whispered, please, just for today. Emily's small fingers tightened in the rough leather edge of Marcus Donovan's vest as the angry voice echoed again across the parking lot. Emily, where are you? The fear in her eyes was instant and unmistakable. Marcus had spent many years learning how to read people on dangerous roads and in darker places, and the look in this little girl's face was not simple nervousness. It was the quiet, sharp fear of someone who knew exactly who that voice belonged to. Marcus slowly rose from one knee, his large frame unfolding like a wall rising between Emily and the direction of the voice. He turned his head slightly, scanning the parking lot of Miller Family Grocery. The late afternoon light stretched long shadows across the cracked pavement. A rusty pickup truck sat near the gas pumps, and an older couple loaded groceries into the back of a faded blue sedan near the front doors of the store. A tall man in a gray shirt stepped outside, looking around with the impatient anger of someone already in a bad mood. Even from across the lot, Marcus could see the tension in the man's shoulders. The man looked to be somewhere in his late 30s, broad, but unsteady, like someone used to pushing people around rather than working for a living. His eyes scanned the lot until they briefly passed over Marcus' motorcycle and then drifted away, dismissing the large biker as just another stranger passing through town. Marcus lowered his voice and spoke quietly to the girl beside him. "Emily, is that the man who was calling for you?" Emily nodded quickly, her small voice barely louder than the wind. "I do not want him to see me," she whispered. Marcus felt a slow tightening in his chest. Something about the way she said those words told him this was not a simple family misunderstanding. He crouched slightly again, bringing his voice down to the calm, steady tone he had once used with frightened civilians during his years in the Marine Corps. "Why do you need someone to pretend to be your dad today, kid?" Emily carefully unfolded the construction paper. She had been holding the paper, trembled slightly in her hands as she turned it so Marcus could read the bright, uneven crayon letters. "Father Day school picnic today. Bring your dad." The edges of the paper were decorated with small stick figure drawings of smiling families and colorful balloons. Marcus studied the page for a moment, feeling an uncomfortable pressure building behind his ribs. "Is your father coming to the picnic?" he asked gently. Emily shook her head, her eyes dropped to the ground as she spoke. "My real dad lives very far away. My mom says he cannot come anymore." Marcus did not ask more questions. Some stories did not need details to be understood. He had seen enough broken families during his life to recognize the quiet spaces left behind when someone important was gone. Emily continued, speaking in a small, careful voice. "The other kids at school are bringing their dads today. There will be games and hot dogs. And the teacher said every child needs a dad partner for the races." She looked up at Marcus again, hope flickering uncertainly in her eyes. "If I do not have a dad, then I cannot play." The words landed harder than Marcus expected. He had not thought about school picnics or simple childhood events in many years. The world he had lived in since leaving the Marines had been filled with engines, highways, and rough bars, where people did not talk about things like family races or paper crowns made by kindergarten teachers. Across the parking lot, the man in the gray shirt shouted again, louder this time, "Emily Carter, I know you are around here." Marcus watched as the man walked further into the lot, his boots scraping against the pavement. His expression carried the tight irritation of someone who believed the world should obey him. Emily instinctively stepped closer to Marcus until the front of her dress brushed against his heavy motorcycle boots. Her small hand reached out and lightly touched the side of his leather jacket, like she was checking to see if he was really there. Marcus looked down at the girl, then back toward the approaching man. He noticed something else now. The man was not calling for Emily with the worried urgency of a parent searching for a missing child. His voice carried frustration, anger, and something colder underneath. Marcus had heard that tone before, and it never meant anything good. Emily's voice trembled again when she spoke. "If he finds me, he will make me go home, and then I cannot go to the school picnic." Her fingers tightened around the paper invitation like it was the most important thing in the world. Marcus Donovan had ridden thousands of miles across this country. He had faced storms, desert heat, and men far more dangerous than this angry stranger walking across the parking lot. But at that moment, the only thing he could see was a 5-year-old girl standing alone with a crayon-colored invitation and a quiet hope that anyone might pretend to be her father just long enough to give her one normal day. Marcus Donovan remained still as the man in the gray shirt continued walking across the parking lot, his boots striking the pavement with slow, impatient steps. The distance between them was shrinking, but Marcus did not move. Instead, he studied the man carefully, the way a seasoned rider studied the road ahead before a dangerous curve. Years of experience had taught him that the smallest details often revealed the most truth. The man's shoulders were tense, his jaw tight, and his eyes carried the restless irritation of someone who believed every problem in the world was caused by someone else. Emily Carter stood very close to Marcus, now almost hidden beside the heavy black frame of the Harley-Davidson motorcycle. The late afternoon sunlight glinted off the chrome engine parts, while the warm wind gently moved the hem of her small blue dress. Marcus could feel the faint pressure of her hand against his leather vest, as if she needed to make sure he would not disappear. Suddenly Marcus exhaled slowly and shook his head. "Kid, you picked the wrong guy," he said quietly. His voice was calm but firm. "I am not the kind of man who pretends to be anybody, father." Emily's eyes widened slightly, as if she had expected this answer, but still hoped it would not come. She lowered her gaze to the ground again, and for a moment, she said nothing. Marcus shifted his weight and reached for the handlebar of his motorcycle, intending to end the conversation. The open highway was calling to him, as it always did when situations started to grow complicated. Marcus Donovan had survived most of his life by following one simple rule: do not get involved in other people's problems. The road was cleaner, simpler out there. There were no school picnics, no angry men shouting across grocery store parking lots, and no small children looking at him like he might somehow fix their day. But before Marcus could swing his leg over the motorcycle seat, Emily spoke again. Her voice was so soft that he almost did not hear it. "My mom said bikers protect people." Marcus froze. The words were simple, spoken with the innocent certainty only a child could carry, but they landed with unexpected weight. Marcus slowly turned his head and looked down at her again. Emily's eyes were fixed on the leather patch across the back of his vest. The red and white emblem of the Hell Angels Motorcycle Club was worn from years of sun, wind, and rain, but it still carried the same reputation it always had in most towns. That patch caused people to step aside, lower their voices, or simply leave the area. But in Emily Carter's eyes, it seemed to mean something very different. Marcus felt an unfamiliar tightening in his chest as memories stirred quietly in the back of his mind. Long ago, during his first years riding with the club, an older member had once told him that the patch was supposed to mean something more than fear. It was supposed to mean loyalty, protection, and standing between danger and those who could not defend themselves. Marcus had not thought about those words in many years. Emily shifted slightly and looked up at him again. Her small voice carried a fragile hope that was impossible to ignore. "The teacher said every child should have someone cheering for them at the race. If I do not have a dad partner, then I have to sit on the bench while everyone else plays." Marcus glanced once more toward the man in the gray shirt, who was now halfway across the parking lot, still searching, still angry. The man had not yet noticed Emily standing beside the large motorcycle. Marcus Donovan let out a slow breath. The open road could wait another minute. He crouched down again until his eyes were level with Emily Carter and studied her face carefully. The dust on her shoes, the trembling edge of her paper invitation, the determined courage in her eyes despite the fear. Marcus rubbed a hand across his beard as if wrestling with a decision he did not want to make. Finally, he spoke again, his deep voice quieter now than before. "All right, kid," he said slowly. "If I do this, it is only for today." Emily's face brightened instantly, like the sun breaking through a heavy cloud. Marcus raised one finger gently, as if setting the terms of a very serious agreement. "We make it look real," he continued. "You stay close to me, and you let me do the talking." Emily nodded quickly, excitement mixing with relief in her eyes. Behind them, the sound of approaching footsteps grew louder as the angry man continued walking across the lot, completely unaware that the small girl he was searching for had just found the most unexpected protector in the entire town of Redfield, Missouri. Marcus Donovan slowly stood back up after speaking his agreement, and the weight of the decision settled over him like the first rumble of distant thunder. The warm Missouri breeze carried the smell of gasoline and sun-heated pavement through the parking lot, but Marcus' attention was now fixed on the man approaching from across the asphalt. The man in the gray shirt had finally noticed them. His eyes narrowed slightly as he changed direction and began walking straight toward the Harley-Davidson motorcycle. Emily Carter instantly pressed closer to Marcus' side, her small fingers gripping the edge of his leather vest, as if the heavy jacket were a shield. Marcus could feel the tension in her hand, and he lowered his arm slightly, placing it loosely around her shoulders in a protective gesture that looked casual but carried a clear message. "Stay close, kid," he murmured quietly. Emily nodded without speaking. The sound of the man's boots scraping across the pavement grew louder with each step. A few shoppers near the gas pumps had begun to notice the situation. An elderly man paused while loading groceries into his truck. A teenage clerk from the store leaned against the glass door, pretending to organize shopping carts while secretly watching the scene unfold. The stranger finally stopped a few yards away from Marcus. His face was flushed from irritation, and the harsh sunlight revealed the deep lines around his mouth. "You see a little girl around here?" he asked sharply. His voice carried the impatient edge of someone used to being obeyed. Marcus did not answer immediately. Instead, he tilted his head slightly, studying the man the same way he would evaluate a rider at a roadside bar before deciding whether the person was trouble or just loud. The man shifted his weight, and his gaze moved from Marcus' beard to the large Hell Angels patch on the back of the vest. The reaction was immediate. His expression tightened with a mixture of caution and annoyance. "Yeah, "That is what I thought," he muttered under his breath. Emily's face remained hidden against Marcus' side, but Marcus could feel the way she had gone completely still like a small animal, hoping not to be noticed. Marcus spoke calmly, without raising his voice. "I saw a lot of people come through this lot today," he said slowly. "Families, travelers, folks grabbing groceries before dinner. You looking for someone specific?" The man's eyes flicked down for a moment, and finally landed on the small blue dress, barely visible, beside Marcus' leg. "There you are," he snapped, pointing toward Emily. Emily immediately tightened her grip on Marcus' vest. Marcus lowered his gaze toward the little girl, then looked back at the man with a controlled expression. "That your daughter?" he asked. The man hesitated for half a second, then shrugged. "Yes, something like that." Marcus noticed the answer instantly. It was not the tone of a father calling for his child. It sounded more like someone claiming a piece of property. Marcus shifted his stance slightly, placing his heavy boot forward, so that his body stood fully between Emily and the stranger. The movement was subtle but deliberate. The man frowned at the change in posture. "Who are you supposed to be?" he demanded. Marcus answered without hesitation. "Her dad." The words came out calm, steady, and completely convincing. Emily looked up at him in surprise, but said nothing. The stranger blinked once, clearly thrown off by the unexpected response. He glanced again at the large motorcycle, the leather vest, and the quiet confidence in Marcus' posture. The hesitation returned to his face. "I have never seen you around here," he said. Slowly Marcus shrugged, as if the conversation bored him. "That is because I ride through town more than I stay in it." The man stared at him for another long moment, clearly trying to decide how much trouble he wanted to start in front of witnesses and a man who outweighed him by nearly 80 pounds. Behind Marcus, Emily whispered softly, "Thank you, Dad." The word slipped out naturally, and the sound of it carried a strange warmth Marcus had not felt in many years. The man in the gray shirt heard it too. His jaw tightened again, and a flicker of anger crossed his face, but now there was something else mixed with it, uncertainty. Marcus leaned casually against the motorcycle, while keeping his arm lightly around Emily's shoulders, and his eyes locked calmly on the stranger in that quiet grocery store parking lot beneath the fading Missouri sunlight. Marcus Donovan realized that pretending to be a father for one afternoon might require far more courage than any ride he had taken on the open road. The stranger in the gray shirt stood silent for several long seconds as Marcus Donovan remained calmly beside the black Harley-Davidson motorcycle, with his arm resting lightly around Emily Carter's shoulders. The late afternoon sun was dropping lower now, stretching golden light across the parking lot and reflecting softly off the chrome of the motorcycle engine. A light wind stirred the paper invitation still clutched in Emily's small hand. The man's eyes shifted back and forth between Marcus' broad shoulders, the leather vest with the Hell Angels patch, and the quiet determination in Marcus' face. Finally the man gave a short, frustrated breath and shook his head. "Whatever," he muttered, "you keep her busy then, I guess." He turned sharply and walked back toward the grocery store entrance, his boots striking the pavement with irritated force. The tension that had filled the air moments earlier slowly faded. The older couple near the gas pumps resumed loading their groceries, and the teenage clerk at the door pushed a row of carts back inside, pretending nothing unusual had happened. Emily remained still for a moment, as if she could not quite believe the man had actually walked away. Marcus felt her grip loosen slightly on his vest, and he glanced down at her. "Well, kid," he said quietly, "looks like that part worked." Emily looked up at him, her brown eyes wide with relief and excitement. "You did it," she whispered. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Did what you told him you were my dad," she said with a small smile. Marcus scratched the side of his beard thoughtfully and looked across the empty stretch of parking lot where the stranger had disappeared through the glass doors of the store. "We might want to keep moving before he decides to come back with more questions," he said. Emily nodded quickly. "The school picnic is at Riverside Elementary," she explained. "My teacher said it starts soon." Marcus glanced toward the highway that ran past the grocery store, and then back toward the small town streets branching away from the lot. Riverside Elementary was only a few blocks away. He had passed the school earlier. While riding into town, he looked down again at the little girl standing beside him. Her blue dress fluttered gently in the breeze, and the bright crayon drawings on her invitation looked almost too cheerful for the serious moment they had just shared. Marcus felt the strange, unfamiliar weight of responsibility settle deeper into his chest. He had faced gunfire during his time in the Marine Corps. He had ridden through violent storms across long stretches of desert highway. But somehow agreeing to spend an afternoon pretending to be A father felt more complicated than any of those things. He crouched slightly again, so he was closer to Emily. Height, all right, kid, he said slowly. If we are doing this, we are doing it right. Emily eyes lit up instantly. What do you mean? Marcus pointed gently at the colorful paper in her hand. What kind of races are we talking about here? Emily opened the paper quickly and began pointing to different drawings with excitement. There is a sack race and a three-leg race and a tug of war, and there are hot dogs and lemonade, and the teacher said every kid gets a paper crown. Marcus listened, carefully nodding as if he were studying a mission briefing. The idea of a school picnic was a long way from the life he normally lived, but Marcus Donovan had always believed that if you committed to something you did it properly. He stood again and glanced at the Harley-Davidson motorcycle parked beside them. For a moment, he considered riding the short distance to the school, but then he noticed the way Emily's eyes lingered on the motorcycle with both fascination and a little nervousness. Maybe we walk, he said finally. It is not far. Emily nodded happily and slipped her small hand into his large, calloused one. The contact felt strange to Marcus at first. Her hand was warm and light, barely filling his palm. As they started toward the sidewalk leading away from the grocery store, Emily looked up at him again with a hopeful expression. Mr. Marcus, she said softly. Marcus glanced down at her. You do not have to call me Mr. today, she continued. If we are pretending, you can just be Dad. Marcus did not answer right away. The word hung quietly in the air between them as they walked past the edge of the parking lot toward the quiet tree-lined street that led to Riverside Elementary, and for the first time in many years Marcus Donovan felt something inside his chest shift in a way he had not expected. When he stopped for gas on an ordinary afternoon ride through a small Missouri town, Marcus Donovan and Emily Carter walked slowly along the quiet sidewalk that led away from Miller Family Grocery toward Riverside Elementary. The afternoon sun filtered through rows of tall maple trees that lined the street, and the shade created long moving patterns across the pavement. Emily's small hand remained wrapped around Marcus' large calloused fingers, and every few steps she looked up at him, as if confirming he was still there. Cars rolled past occasionally, but most of the neighborhood was peaceful, the kind of quiet small-town street where children rode bicycles and neighbors waved from their front porches. For Marcus, the calmness felt strangely unfamiliar. His life had been built around highways, loud engines, and endless miles of open road, yet now he was walking beside a 5-year-old girl toward a school picnic like it was the most normal thing in the world. Emily's voice broke the silence. Do you know how to run a 3-leg race? Marcus looked down at her with mild surprise. I know how to run pretty fast, he answered carefully. Emily giggled a little. The teacher says we have to tie our legs together with a scarf, so we move at the same time. Marcus pictured the situation in his mind, a 6'4" biker with a leather vest and heavy boots hopping awkwardly beside a tiny girl across a grassy school field. The thought almost made him laugh, which was something he had not done very much in recent years. They continued walking for another moment before Marcus spoke again in a quieter tone. Emily, why were you alone at the grocery store earlier? The question seemed gentle but direct. Emily looked down at the sidewalk while they walked. My mom works at the diner near the highway, she said softly. She told me to wait by the grocery store until she finished her shift because the school picnic was today. Marcus nodded slowly, understanding the situation. A single mother working a long shift, trying to make sure her daughter did not miss an important day at school. It was a story he had seen repeated in many small towns across the country. Emily continued talking. My mom said she was going to meet me at the school, but then he showed up again. Marcus' attention sharpened slightly. The man in the gray shirt, he does not live with us anymore, Emily said quickly. Mom says he is not supposed to come near our house, but sometimes he still tries to talk to her. Marcus felt a quiet heaviness settle in his chest again. He had seen the same kind of situation many times during his years traveling from town to town, people with bad tempers and worse judgment who refused to leave when they were supposed to. Emily's voice grew smaller when she added, Mom says he gets angry very easily. That was all the explanation Marcus needed. The sound of children laughing carried through the warm air ahead of them, and as they turned the next corner, the red brick building of Riverside Elementary came into view. Colorful banners hung along the front fence, and a large grassy field beside the school was already filled with folding tables, bright balloons, and families gathered together. Parents stood beside their children, while teachers organized small groups near different activity stations. The smell of grilled hot dogs drifted across the field. Emily's face lit up instantly. We made it, she said excitedly. Marcus slowed his steps As they approached the edge of the school grounds for the first time, he became aware of how different he looked compared to the other fathers in the field. Most of them wore baseball caps, polo shirts, or work uniforms. Marcus stood among them like a thunderstorm cloud in a clear blue sky, tall leather vest, heavy boots, beard streaked with gray, and arms covered with old Marine Corps tattoos. Emily noticed his hesitation and squeezed his hand gently. "It is okay, Dad," she said with quiet confidence. Marcus looked down at her, surprised by the natural way the word came from her mouth. Then she pointed toward the race area where several children were already lining up with their fathers. "Come on," she added, "we have to sign up before the race starts." Marcus Donovan took a slow breath and followed the little girl onto the bright green grass of Riverside Elementary, completely unaware that this simple afternoon would soon bring back memories from a past he had tried very hard to forget. Marcus Donovan followed Emily Carter deeper onto the grassy field of Riverside Elementary, while the bright sounds of laughter and excited children filled the warm Missouri afternoon. The field was alive with color. Red, white, and blue streamers hung between wooden posts, and long folding tables held trays of lemonade, paper cups, and plates stacked with hot dogs. Fresh chalk lines had been drawn across the grass to mark the lanes for different races, and groups of fathers and children gathered near each station preparing for the games. Emily guided Marcus toward a small folding table where a cheerful teacher with a clipboard was checking names. "Welcome to the Father Day picnic," she said with a friendly smile. Her eyes briefly widened when she noticed Marcus' towering frame and leather vest, but the expression quickly softened when she saw Emily holding his hand. "And who do we have here?" Emily stood proudly beside Marcus. "This is my dad," she said with quiet confidence. Marcus gave a small nod while the teacher wrote Emily Carter and partner Marcus Donovan onto the sign-up sheet. The teacher handed Emily a bright yellow ribbon that read race team and pointed them toward a group forming near the three-leg race area. As they walked across the grass, Marcus could feel the curious glances from other parents. Some whispered quietly, while others simply watched with open curiosity. A tall biker covered in old Marine Corps tattoos did not blend easily into a crowd of parents wearing baseball caps and summer shirts. Emily, however, seemed completely comfortable. She waved at several classmates who stood nearby, holding colorful balloons. One small boy ran over to them. "Emily, you made it," he shouted excitedly. "I thought you were not coming." Emily lifted the invitation proudly. "My dad brought me," she said. The boy looked up at Marcus with wide eyes. "Mister, you are really tall." Marcus almost smiled. "I have heard that before, kid," he replied. A whistle sounded across the field, and one of the teachers called out, "Three-leg race teams, please come to the starting line." Marcus looked down at Emily. "So how does this work again?" Emily held up a long red scarf that one of the teachers handed to them. "We tie your leg and my leg together like this," she explained. Carefully, the teacher helped secure the scarf around Marcus' left ankle and Emily right ankle, creating a pair that would have to move in perfect rhythm. Marcus glanced down at the small knot and then at the grassy lane stretching about 50 yards ahead of them. "You ready for this, partner?" he asked. Emily nodded with determination. "Ready, Dad." The word landed softly in Marcus' ears again, but this time it felt less strange. The whistle blew, and the teams began hopping forward across the grass. Marcus quickly realized that the race required more patience than strength. "Slow and steady," Emily laughed as they stumbled forward. In their first few steps, Marcus adjusted his pace, matching the rhythm of her smaller strides. Soon, they were moving together, left, right. The crowd cheered as the pairs made their way down the field. Emily's laughter rang out bright and carefree, and Marcus felt something inside him ease in a way he had not experienced for many years. When they crossed the finish line, they were not first and they were not last, but Emily raised both arms in victory like they had won the entire race. "That was amazing," she exclaimed, breathless. Marcus loosened the scarf from their legs and looked down at her. "You did all the hard work, kid. I just followed your lead." As the other families gathered near the finish line, Marcus scanned the edge of the school grounds. Out of habit, his eyes paused near the far side of the fence where the quiet street met the field. For a moment, he thought he saw a familiar gray shirt near the parked cars across the road. The figure stood partially hidden behind a pickup truck, watching the celebration from a distance. Marcus' expression darkened slightly. The man from the grocery store had followed them. Emily tugged gently on his hand. "Come on, Dad, the sack race is starting next." Marcus forced his attention back to the little girl beside him, but the feeling of being watched remained steady in the back of his mind. The afternoon games were only just Beginning, and Marcus Donovan knew that the man across the street had not come all this way simply to watch children play. On a sunny Missouri afternoon, Emily Carter pulled gently on Marcus Donovan's hand as the cheerful noise of the school picnic continued across the wide green field of Riverside Elementary. The laughter of children mixed with the distant sound of a portable radio playing soft country music near the food tables. Bright balloons floated above the grass tied to wooden stakes, while teachers moved between the groups, organizing the next games for most of the families gathered there. The afternoon was simple and joyful, but Marcus' attention kept drifting toward the quiet street beyond the fence where he had noticed the man in the gray shirt. Earlier, the figure was no longer standing beside the pickup truck, but Marcus' instincts told him the man had not gone far. Emily's voice brought his focus back to the present. The sack race is over there, she said, pointing toward a line of large burlap bags placed along a chalk starting line. Several children were already stepping into the bags, while their fathers stood nearby, cheering them on. Marcus nodded and walked with her toward the race area. A teacher handed Emily a small burlap sack that reached almost to her shoulders, and Marcus crouched slightly so he could help hold it steady while she stepped inside the rough fabric. Ready? He asked. Emily nodded eagerly. I am going to jump really fast, she said with a grin. Marcus stepped back while the teacher explained the rules to the group. The children would race across the grass in their sacks, while the parents waited at the finish line to cheer for them. The whistle blew and the race began. Emily started hopping forward with determined little jumps while the other children bounced beside her across the field. Marcus walked along the sideline, keeping pace with her progress, his heavy boots pressed deep into the grass, while parents around him shouted encouragement. Emily's laughter floated through the air each time she bounced forward, and for a moment Marcus almost forgot the uneasy feeling that had followed him since he spotted the man across the street. Emily crossed the finish line near the middle of the group and raised her arms proudly again. Marcus clapped once and nodded. That was a strong race, kid, he said. Emily stepped out of the sack breathless, but smiling. Did you see how fast I went? Marcus nodded. I did. You look like a kangaroo with a mission. Emily laughed again, but then her expression changed slightly as she looked past Marcus' shoulder. What is he doing here? She whispered. Marcus turned slowly, following her gaze across the street near the corner of the school fence. The man in the gray shirt had returned. He was no longer hiding behind the parked truck. Now he stood openly beside the sidewalk watching the picnic with a cold, fixed stare. His arms were crossed, and his expression carried the same restless irritation Marcus had seen earlier. Emily instinctively moved closer to Marcus' side. He said he might come back, she murmured. Marcus kept his voice calm. Stay close to me. Emily nodded and held onto the edge of his vest again. A teacher nearby called out for the next activity. Tug of war teams gather on the north side of the field. Families began moving toward a thick rope stretched across the grass. Marcus allowed Emily to guide him with the group, but his eyes remained aware of the man across the street. The stranger had taken a few steps closer, now standing directly beside the school fence, watching every movement on the field. Marcus recognized the expression instantly. It was the look of someone waiting for the right moment to create trouble. Emily squeezed his hand gently. Dad, she said quietly. Marcus glanced down at her. Yes, kid. Do not let him take me home today. Marcus felt the quiet seriousness of her request settle heavily in his chest again. He looked once more toward the man across the street, whose gaze remained locked on them through the metal fence. Then Marcus Donovan straightened his shoulders slightly and gave Emily a calm, reassuring nod. Nobody is taking you anywhere today, he said firmly. Around them the picnic continued with cheerful noise and excited voices, but Marcus could already sense that the peaceful afternoon at Riverside Elementary was slowly moving toward a confrontation that neither he nor the man in the gray shirt intended to avoid. The thick tug of war rope stretched across the green grass of Riverside Elementary while families gathered on both sides, laughing and organizing teams. Children lined up beside their fathers, gripping the rope with excited determination, while teachers explained the rules through a small portable speaker. The warm afternoon sun now hung lower in the sky, casting a softer golden light across the field, but Marcus Donovan's attention remained divided between the cheerful activity around him and the silent figure standing beyond the metal fence across the street. The man in the gray shirt had moved closer again and now stood directly opposite the tug-of-war area, watching the field with a narrow, calculating stare. Emily Carter remained close beside Marcus, her small hand gripping his leather vest, As if the fabric itself could anchor her safely in place. Marcus glanced down at her and spoke quietly, "You ready to pull on that rope?" Partner Emily nodded bravely, though her eyes flickered toward the fence for a moment. "I am ready," she said. Marcus placed one large hand gently on her shoulder, then guided her toward the end of the rope, where several other children were already forming a line. The fathers stood behind their kids, gripping the rope with steady hands. A tall man, wearing a baseball cap, offered Marcus a friendly nod. "First time at the picnic?" he asked. Marcus gave a small shrug. "Something like that." Emily looked up proudly. "My dad is really strong," she said. The man chuckled. "Well, then we are glad he is on our side." A whistle sounded, and the tug of war began. The rope tightened instantly as both teams leaned backward, digging their heels into the grass. Children shouted encouragement, while parents gripped the rope with determined smiles. Marcus wrapped his large hands around the rough fibers and leaned back, carefully, making sure not to pull too hard, too quickly. The line of families behind him shifted slowly as the rope moved inch by inch across the chalk mark in the grass. Emily planted her small shoes firmly and pulled with all the strength she could manage. Marcus kept his movements steady, guiding the team without overwhelming the children beside him. Slowly their side gained ground until the whistle blew again, signaling their victory. Cheers erupted across the field. Emily laughed breathlessly and turned to Marcus. "We won." Marcus loosened his grip on the rope and gave her a small nod. "Good teamwork, kid." But the moment of celebration was short-lived. A sudden voice carried across the edge of the field, "That is enough of this." The cheerful noise of the picnic quieted slightly as heads turned toward the fence. The man in the gray shirt had pushed open the small gate at the corner of the schoolyard and was now walking directly onto the grass toward them. His expression was tight with anger and his eyes were locked on Emily. Marcus straightened slowly, his posture shifting from relaxed to alert. Emily's hand tightened around his vest again. "I told you he would come," she whispered. The man stopped several yards away, his gaze moving from Emily to Marcus. "So this is the big hero now?" he said sharply. Marcus remained calm. "What do you want?" The man pointed toward Emily. "She is coming home with me right now." Emily shook her head quickly. "No." Marcus lowered his gaze toward the little girl, then looked back at the man with steady eyes. "The picnic is not over," he said. The man scoffed. "I do not care about your picnic. That girl belongs with her family." Marcus' voice remained even. "She is exactly where she needs to be." A few parents nearby began watching closely, while one teacher quietly stepped toward the school building, clearly preparing to call for help. The man took another step forward, his voice rising. "I am not asking again. Move aside." Marcus Donovan did not move. Instead, he placed one protective hand lightly in front of Emily, keeping her behind him. The warm afternoon air seemed to grow still as the confrontation settled across the field. Children stood quietly beside their parents, unsure of what was happening. Marcus' eyes remained fixed on the man in the gray shirt, and his voice stayed calm but firm. "You are done shouting at this kid in public." The man laughed bitterly. "Who do you think you are?" Marcus answered without hesitation. "The one standing between you and her." And in that moment, every person on the field could feel that the peaceful school picnic had turned into something far more serious than a simple afternoon of games. The entire field of Riverside Elementary seemed to hold its breath as Marcus Donovan stood between Emily Carter and the man in the gray shirt. The cheerful sounds of the Father Day picnic had faded into uneasy whispers. Parents slowly pulled their children closer, while several teachers moved quietly toward the edge of the field, ready to step in if the situation grew worse. The man took another step forward, his boots pressing hard into the grass. His face had turned red with anger, and his eyes locked directly onto Emily. "You heard me," he said sharply. "She is coming home with me right now." Emily gripped the back of Marcus' leather vest and hid partially behind his tall frame. Her small voice trembled. "No." Marcus felt the movement behind him and placed one steady hand slightly behind his legs, signaling for her to stay there. His voice remained calm, but carried the quiet authority that had once commanded respect in far more dangerous places. "You are not taking her anywhere today," he said. The man laughed harshly and shook his head. "Who do you think you are, telling me what to do?" Marcus met his stare without blinking. "I am the one standing here." The man stepped closer until only a few feet separated them. Several parents nearby watched nervously, while one teacher whispered urgently into a phone, likely calling the school office. The man pointed past Marcus' shoulder toward Emily. "That girl belongs with her family," Marcus replied, without raising his voice. "Then maybe you should start acting like family instead of showing up here shouting at her in front of a Field full of kids, the man face twisted with anger. You do not know anything about our business. Marcus gave a slight nod. You are right, I do not. But I know what fear looks like. When a 5-year-old hears your voice, a quiet murmur moved through the watching crowd. The man looked around, realizing that every parent and teacher on the field was now paying attention. His pride seemed to flare under the weight of their eyes. You think that patch on your back scares me, he said, stepping even closer. Marcus remained completely still. The leather vest did not make him dangerous. His calm did. The difference in their presence was clear to everyone watching. The man continued, his voice louder now. She is coming with me, or I will call the police. Marcus tilted his head slightly, as if considering the idea. That might not work out the way you expect. The man frowned. What is that supposed to mean? Marcus answered simply, it means that if the police arrive, they might start asking why a man who is not welcome near her house showed up at a school picnic looking for her. A teacher standing nearby spoke firmly. Sir, you need to step away from the children. The man ignored her completely and tried to move around Marcus to reach Emily. Marcus shifted one step sideways, blocking the path without touching him. The movement was smooth, controlled, and impossible to ignore. The man stopped suddenly, realizing he was facing someone who was not going to move. Marcus' voice dropped lower, but every word carried across the silent field. Listen carefully. He said, you can walk back through that gate right now and leave this place peacefully, or you can stay here and explain your behavior to the police and the school administration. The choice is yours. The man's jaw tightened and his hands curled into fists, but the presence of so many watching parents began to weigh heavily on him. A distant sound of a vehicle approaching the school parking lot drifted through the air, likely the security officer or local police responding to the teacher call. Marcus kept his gaze steady on the man, while the tension stretched across the field behind him. Emily whispered quietly, Dad. Marcus did not look back, but he answered softly, I am right here. Kid. The man in the gray shirt stared at Marcus for another long moment as the approaching vehicle grew louder beyond the school building, and everyone standing on the field could sense that the next few seconds would decide how the confrontation ended. The distant sound of a vehicle rolling into the school parking lot grew louder, and several heads across the field turned toward the entrance of Riverside Elementary. The man in the gray shirt noticed it too. His eyes shifted briefly toward the street before returning to Marcus Donovan with a hard expression. The tension in the air was thick enough that even the children could sense it. Emily Carter stayed close behind Marcus, her small hands gripping the back of his leather vest, while she watched the scene unfold with wide, uncertain eyes. Marcus remained perfectly still, his shoulders relaxed, but his stance firm, like a solid wall planted in the middle of the field. The man exhaled sharply and took a slow step backward. You think you are some kind of hero, he muttered. Marcus answered calmly, no, I am just someone who showed up today. The low rumble of a patrol vehicle engine drifted across the grass, and moments later, a white county sheriff truck appeared near the edge of the school parking lot. The vehicle rolled slowly to a stop, and a uniformed deputy stepped out, adjusting the brim of his hat as he surveyed the crowd. Several teachers waved him toward the field, while quietly explaining the situation. The deputy began walking across the grass, his boots pressing deep into the soft ground. As he approached the gathering of parents, the man in the gray shirt shifted uncomfortably, now his earlier confidence beginning to crack. Marcus watched him closely without speaking. Emily's voice came softly from behind him, is everything going to be okay? Marcus nodded slightly. Yes, kid, it will be fine. The deputy reached the group and looked from Marcus to the angry man, then down at Emily standing behind the tall biker. What seems to be the problem here? He asked in a calm, steady tone. The teacher, who had called earlier, stepped forward. That man came onto school grounds and began shouting at the child during the picnic. She explained. Several parents nodded quietly in agreement. The deputy turned toward the man in the gray shirt. Sir, do you want to explain why you are causing a disturbance at an elementary school? The man ran a hand through his hair and pointed toward Emily. She is supposed to be coming home with me. The deputy raised an eyebrow. Are you her father? The man hesitated and glanced briefly at Marcus before answering, not exactly. The deputy folded his arms. Then you are going to need a much better reason for showing up here and demanding to take a child away from a school event. Marcus finally spoke. His voice was calm but clear. The child told me her mother asked her to wait for her after work. The man in the gray shirt was already bothering her earlier in town. The deputy studied both men carefully, then looked down at Emily. What is your name, sweetheart? Emily Carter. She answered quietly. The deputy softened his tone. Emily, is this man your father? She shook her head. No, sir, he used to come to our house but my mom says he is not supposed to anymore. The deputy expression changed immediately. He turned back toward the man in the gray shirt with a serious look. Do you have any legal reason to be here today? The man looked around at the watching parents, realizing the situation had shifted beyond his control. I was just trying to talk to her, he muttered. The deputy shook his head. That conversation will not happen here. You need to leave the school grounds now. And if there is any kind of restraining order involved, you should be very careful about coming back. The man clenched his jaw, but said nothing. The presence of the deputy and the crowd of witnesses had drained the fight from his posture. After a long moment, he turned away and began walking toward the gate without another word. A quiet wave of relief moved through the parents standing nearby. Marcus glanced down as Emily slowly stepped out from behind him. The deputy looked at Marcus, then at the little girl, and gave a small approving nod. Looks like she had someone looking out for her today. Marcus simply answered, everyone deserves that, especially kids. The deputy tipped his hat and turned back toward the parking lot as the tension that had gripped the school picnic slowly began to fade away. The tension that had gripped the field slowly dissolved after the man in the gray shirt walked through the gate and disappeared down the sidewalk beyond Riverside Elementary. The deputy sheriff spoke briefly with the teachers near the entrance before returning to his patrol vehicle and leaving the school grounds. Parents gradually relaxed, and the cheerful noise of the picnic returned as children hurried back toward the activity stations, and the smell of grilled hot dogs drifted across the grass. Once again, Emily Carter stood beside Marcus Donovan for a quiet moment, watching the place where the man had been only minutes earlier. Her small shoulders finally relaxed, and she looked up at Marcus with a soft smile. He really left, she said. Marcus nodded. Yes, kid, he did. The teachers quickly gathered the families again, and one of them raised a small portable speaker. Thank you everyone for your patience, she said with a warm voice. Let us finish this beautiful afternoon together. The children responded with excited cheers, and soon the field returned to the lively energy of the celebration. Emily tugged gently on Marcus' hand. The lemonade table is over there, she said. Marcus followed her across the grass toward a long folding table where a volunteer poured cups of cold lemonade into small paper cups. Emily accepted one gratefully, and Marcus took another, though he only held it loosely in his hand. Several parents nearby offered him respectful nods while a few whispered quiet words of thanks. One older man with a gray beard stepped closer and spoke quietly. That was a good thing you did for that little girl today, Marcus answered simply. Anyone would have done the same. The man shook his head. Not everyone. Marcus did not respond to that. Instead, he looked down at Emily, who had already finished half of her lemonade and was now watching a group of children preparing for the final relay race of the afternoon. Do you want to try the last game? He asked. Emily nodded eagerly. Yes, please. The final race involved children running a short distance with a small baton before handing it to their parent, who would finish the second half of the course. Emily lined up with the other kids, and when the whistle blew, she ran with all the determination in her small legs. Marcus waited near the turning point of the course, watching carefully as she raced toward him. The sunlight glowed softly across the field, and for a brief moment, everything felt peaceful again. Emily reached him laughing and handed over the baton. Go, Dad, she shouted. Marcus ran the short distance to the finish line with long, steady strides, while the other parents cheered and the children clapped. When he crossed the chalk line, Emily ran to meet him with bright excitement. That was the best race today, she said. Marcus handed the baton back to the teacher and knelt slightly, so he was eye level with Emily. You did great, kid. The music near the picnic tables grew louder as the event slowly began to wind down. Families gathered their belongings while children chased each other through the grass with balloons and paper crowns. Emily sat beside Marcus on the edge of the field, swinging her legs gently while watching the other kids play. After a quiet moment, she spoke again. Thank you for staying with me today. Marcus looked across the field where the golden evening light touched the red brick walls of the school. It was just a day, he said. Emily shook her head softly. It was the best day. Marcus felt the simple honesty of her words settled deeply inside him. A life spent on long highways had not prepared him for moments like this, but somehow the quiet joy of a child enjoying a peaceful afternoon felt more meaningful than any mile he had ever ridden across the country. As the last of the games ended and families began heading toward the parking lot, Marcus Donovan realized that the promise he made earlier to pretend for one day had turned into something far more real than he had ever expected. The golden evening light slowly faded across the field of Riverside Elementary as Families gathered their chairs, blankets, and picnic baskets. Children ran their final playful laps across the grass while teachers began folding tables and collecting the bright decorations that had filled the afternoon with color. Emily Carter sat quietly beside Marcus Donovan near the edge of the field, her small paper crown slightly crooked on her head, and the ribbon from the earlier race still tied loosely around her wrist. She looked tired now, but happy, the kind of peaceful happiness that only comes after a long, exciting day. Marcus rested his forearms on his knees, watching the last families begin to walk toward the parking lot. For a while neither of them spoke. Finally, Emily broke the silence. "My mom should be here soon," she said softly. Marcus nodded. "That is good timing, kid. It looks like the picnic is wrapping up." Just then a woman hurried across the grass from the direction of the school entrance. Her hair was tied back loosely, and she still wore a diner apron over her shirt, as if she had come straight from work. The moment she saw Emily sitting beside Marcus, relief flooded across her face. "Emily," she called. Emily jumped to her feet. "Mom." The two ran toward each other and embraced tightly. The woman knelt down, holding her daughter close, while brushing a strand of hair from Emily's face. "I am so sorry I was late," she said breathlessly. "My shift ran longer than I expected." Emily smiled. "It is okay, Mom. My dad helped me today." The woman looked up in confusion, and her eyes met Marcus standing a few steps away. He gave a quiet, respectful nod. "I am Marcus Donovan," he said. "Your daughter asked if I could pretend to be her dad for the picnic. She seemed like she deserved someone cheering for her today." The woman's eyes softened as she understood the situation. She stood and extended her hand. "Thank you for watching over her. My name is Laura Carter." Marcus shook her hand gently. "She did most of the work. I just try to keep up." Emily stepped between them and looked up at Marcus. "Will you come next year too?" she asked. Marcus smiled faintly at the question. Then he crouched down. "So?" He was level with her again. "Kid, I ride a lot of roads in this country," he said, "but if I happen to pass through this town again around this time next year, I think I might stop by." Emily grinned and hugged him quickly. Before running back to her mother, Laura watched the moment with quiet gratitude. "Some people wear that patch and make others afraid," she said softly, "but today you made my daughter feel safe." Marcus glanced toward the fading sunlight beyond the schoolyard. "Sometimes the road brings you exactly where you need to be," he replied. A few minutes later, Marcus walked back toward the parking lot, where his black Harley-Davidson motorcycle waited beside the quiet street. He put on his helmet, started the engine, and rolled slowly away from Riverside Elementary. In the small mirror, he could see Emily and her mother waving from the schoolyard, and as the motorcycle carried him back toward the open highway, Marcus Donovan realized that the longest roads in life were not always measured in miles. Sometimes they were measured in the simple promise to stand beside someone when they needed it most.